The war against the Varadi Empire had stretched into its 13th brutal year. Entire systems had burned. Colonies vanished in plasma storms. Earth and its allies had won some victories, but the cost was staggering. And now, a new threat loomed, one that could end everything. The Varadi had established a fortified command center on Charon 4, a volcanic, ever-shifting death world hidden within an unstable star system. It was more than a base. It was a supernova communications nexus that coordinated fleets across 5 sectors. If left intact, Earth's resistance would collapse within months. Command weighed their options. Orbital strikes? Useless. The fortress was buried beneath kilometers of reactive rock. Ground assault? Suicide. Thousands of elite Varadi defended. It and the terrain devoured entire regiments. AI simulations calculated the odds of success: 0.6% with a squad, 2.1% with a solo operative. No unit volunteered. No veteran stepped forward. Then came Cadet Talia Voss. At 22, she wasn't what you'd expect from someone selected for a mission like this. She wasn't genetically modified. She wasn't part of a special forces unit. She was a recon cadet, sharp, quiet, with eyes that never missed a detail. But her service record told a different story. She'd survived things no one else had. A recon op into a collapsing space hulk where gravity reversed every 10 minutes, she walked out alone. A hostage rescue where the enemy had neural disruptors, she came back carrying the hostages and 3 enemy prisoners. Her squad mates called her the Ghost, not because she was stealthy, but because she always returned when no one else did. When her name came up in the simulations, someone in command laughed. A cadet? She won't even make landfall. The analyst disagreed. She's unpredictable, adaptable. The AI says her chances are better than a seasoned strike team's. And so, she was summoned out in the high command chamber of the orbital warship Gauntlet. Projections lit the air terrain maps, defenses, time to failure models, red lines, red percentages. The number burned brightest, 2.07% survival probability. Talia stood in the middle of it all, silent. Her uniform was still cadet issue. Her hands were behind her back. She studied the data as if it were an academic exam. No fear, no bravado, just calculation. A commander leaned forward. Do you understand what this means, Cadet Voss? Talia nodded. I'm the best bad idea you've got. The room went quiet. Then she smiled, just a little. So what do I do with the other 98%? It wasn't arrogance. It was resolve, ice cold, ironclad, and entirely human. High Command tried to dissuade her one last time. They offered to promote her, reassign her, protect her from what was clearly a death sentence. She declined every offer. This war ends. One way, she said, with someone doing what everyone else won't. She left the chamber, not with fanfare or ceremony, but with a basic survival kit and a set of modifications. She requested herself makeshift camouflage gels, a toolkit. For field improvisation, a knife made from tungsten carbide layered with plasma-resistant ceramic. No power armor. No drones. Just her. Her drop pod was old model Stealth 2, outdated for standard use, but perfect for avoiding Varadi scans. It launched under a blackout protocol. No one on the ship saluted. No one said goodbye, but when she looked back from the pod's tiny viewport, Earth's flag glowed faintly on the hull of the Gauntlet, and that was enough. Inside the cramped pod, as systems activated and the heat of re-entry built around her, Talia closed her eyes, not in fear, but in focus. She whispered to herself, "Let's show them what 2% can do." Then the pod breached Charon 4's atmosphere. The descent was rough. Plasma storms erupted. The guidance system went dark. She slammed into the planet's surface like a meteor, and so began a mission no one believed in except the one person who mattered. When Cadet Talia Voss opened her eyes after the crash, she wasn't sure if she was dead. Everything was dark, and her body screamed in pain. The pod's cockpit was shattered, smoke curling from ruptured panels. Sparks sizzled above her, and the world outside was stained a deep, sickly red from Charon 4's sulfur-rich skies. Her ribs were bruised, her left ankle possibly fractured, and her pulse was spiking. She ran a diagnostic on her remaining gear. Rifle intact, 3 mags left. Medkit half functional. Rations burned, comms fried. The emergency beacon? Destroyed in the crash. She was alone. The mission began now. Charon 4 was no ordinary world. It was an engineered hell. The Varadi had terraformed it not for agriculture or habitation, but for one purpose: war. The ground was covered in jagged, obsidian blades, crystalline growths that cut through boots like paper. Toxic gas drifted through valleys in silent plumes, often invisible until it ate through flesh. And the wildlife? Worse. Talia dragged herself out of the wreckage, smearing camouflage paste over her face and exposed skin. She wrapped her ankle tightly, tested her weight, and limped into the terrain. The mission: infiltrate the uplink control node buried beneath the main fortress spire, upload a viral payload to disrupt Varadi fleet coordination, and then, if she somehow lived, find an exfiltration point before the entire base came down on her. She had 3 days before the next Varadi fleet deployment. Day 1 was survival. By midday, she encountered her first threat, not Varadi soldiers, but Araxi. Pack, native death hunters bred by the Varadi to patrol their outer zones. 8-limbed insectoids with claws, like swords, and a sense of smell that could detect adrenaline. Talia climbed into the carcass of a dead beast, half digested and stinking, and smeared herself in its bile. She held her breath as the Raxi passed inches from her, sniffing, clicking, searching. She didn't move, didn't blink, didn't even think. Once they left, she crawled to a shallow ravine and lay there, barely conscious, for hours. That night, the temperature dropped below. Freezing, and wind screamed across the plains like dying animals. Her body trembled, but she used her emergency blanket like a cocoon, reinforced it with stone to block the worst of the wind, and sealed her wounds with a coagulant foam. Day 2, she climbed out. The Varadi fortress was carved into the side of a Phi mountain made of volcanic glass and thermoreactive rock. The higher she went, the hotter the stone became, designed that way to discourage scaling attempts. But she knew how to read the flow of terrain, how to test for dead zones, and how to make each step matter. By sunset, her hands were blistered and bleeding. Her muscles ached with every motion. But from the cliff's edge she finally saw it. Spire, a massive needle of black and blue alloy, ringed with sensor towers and guarded by dozens of Varadi patrols. Plasma fences, drone sentries, bioscanners, death in every direction. But there was something they hadn't accounted for. Talia Voss didn't belong here. She wasn't part of a team. She didn't follow doctrine. She wasn't predictable. They were searching for a soldier, but she had become something else, a ghost. That night, she infiltrated a forward outpost near the Spire's base. She used dirt and mud to block her heat signature, slipped through blind spots between drones, and found an entry tunnel beneath a coolant vent. Inside, she scavenged supplies, a satchel of shaped charges, a small power cell, and most importantly, a Varadi command tablet. The interface was alien, but she was fluent in their code structures, having studied Varadi encryption protocols. Since cadet training, she reprogrammed the tablet to feed false sensor data into a nearby surveillance zone, buying herself a few precious hours of invisibility. As she left the outpost, she carved a message into the wall, using a piece of broken armor. 98% left T. Just 3 words. No one would ever see them, except maybe another desperate soldier one day. But they weren't meant for others. They were for her. The uplink was still another 2 kilometers through enemy territory. Deep beneath the mountain, her odds hadn't improved. But as Talia slipped into the shadows, her eyes were clear, focused. This planet was called a graveyard. A place where soldiers came to die. She didn't intend to be one of them. The outer defenses of the Varadi Spire were formidable, but Talia Voss didn't walk through the front gates. She bled her way in. After 2 full days of crawling, climbing, and avoiding sensors with split-second precision, she found an old maintenance shaft beneath the western support strut. It was half collapsed and flooded with steaming runoff, but that also made it forgotten, unwatched. Talia wrenched open the corroded hatch with her knife and disappeared into the darkness below. Inside, it was worse. The passage twisted downward, like a decaying vein. Pipes dripped acid. Wires sparked overhead. Her oxygen meter dipped into red as sulfur and metallic gas pressed in around her. Every breath felt like swallowing razors. Still, she moved forward, slow, silent, and surgical. The shaft eventually dumped her into a dim storage chamber filled with containers the size of trucks. Varadi soldiers marched on patrols above her, their boots clicking in rhythm. But the most dangerous thing wasn't the guards. It was the commander. Commander Draxilka, a high-caste Varadi bred for elite combat. Engineered to kill humans specifically. He had 4 arms, 2 ending in curved blades, 2 in clawed gauntlets. His hide was reinforced with bone plate armor fused with biocircuitry. His eyes glowed crimson, scanning for heat, movement, thought. His neural implants connected directly to the fortress's security systems. Talia didn't know his name. Didn't need to. She only knew he was between her and the uplink core. She ghosted through the inner corridors by blending into the environment. Varadi heat sensors tracked organic signatures, but she'd already disabled her suit's heater and slowed her breathing. Her skin was painted with nanogel mud to scatter IR scans. Her heart rate was down to a crawl. She became noise, shadow, background radiation. When she reached the core vault, her time was running out. The uplink node was housed in a reinforced chamber 3 levels beneath the spire's command tower. Dozens of conduits pulsed with alien energy, blue light twisting like living veins through the structure. One wrong move and the entire base would be on alert. She planted 2 charges near the data feed spines and prepped the third to overload the node. The timer began its silent countdown. That's when he appeared. Draxilka dropped into the vault like a meteor, his bioblades sparking with energy. "You do not belong here, human," he snarled in perfect Terran dialect. "You're outnumbered, outmatched, out of time." Talia didn't flinch. Her rifle was slung across her back, but she didn't reach for it. Instead, she pulled the trigger on the detonator and nothing exploded. The commander laughed, mistaking it for failure. She smirked. "It's proximity-based," she whispered. The walls behind him exploded, not the charges, the walls. She had rigged a power feedback loop in the energy conduits. The resulting overload wasn't a fireball, it was a pulse, a blinding surge of plasma that collapsed half the chamber and shredded the command relays. Draxil was thrown back, scorched and howling. Talia used the moment to rush him. The fight was ugly. He was faster, stronger. She was already bleeding from a gash across her ribs, her ankle barely holding her upright. But she didn't fight like a soldier. She fought like a survivor. A street kid turned cadet turned ghost. She slammed her elbow into his eye socket, took a blade through her shoulder but twisted with it instead of resisting, tearing it from his grasp. She bit his throat, jammed her boot into the exposed neural socket at his spine, and fired her last pulse charge straight into it. He screamed, and then he stopped moving. Talia collapsed beside him, panting, blood-soaked, her pulse thudding. In her ears, the uplink core was melting. Mission accomplished. But the escape? There was none. Smoke choked the room. Lights flashed red. Emergency lockdown procedures began. Blast doors sealing above her, power nodes shorting out. Her exit tunnel was gone. Her body was too broken to run. She stared up at the ceiling, lips cracked, vision spinning, and she smiled. 2%, she muttered, barely conscious, is still not zero. Then the first blast rocked the fortress. The core overload had begun. She had completed the mission. Alone. Against a fortress. Against a monster. She hadn't made it out yet, but she had broken their goddamn empire. And sometimes that's enough. The fortress spire shook violently as internal explosions chained upward from the uplink core. Warning sirens blared in guttural variety tones, emergency shutters sealed corridors, and plasma conduits ruptured, flooding the tunnels with blue-white light. For any normal soldier, escape was now impossible. Talia Voss wasn't a normal soldier. Pinned beneath a fallen support beam, her ribs screamed with every breath. Blood dripped into her eye from a cut along her forehead. Her shoulder was dislocated, the arm barely usable. Every part of her body throbbed with pain. But she was alive, and she had no intention of dying here. She gritted her teeth and used a shard of broken alloy to lever the beam off her leg. Inch by inch, her vision blurred, bones cracked. She didn't scream. Screaming was wasted energy. Once free, she dragged herself across the smoking chamber, coughing from the thick chemical smoke. Her helmet had cracked, but her visor display flickered enough to highlight structural weaknesses in the collapsing walls. She limped to a maintenance hatch half-sealed and kicked it open with the last of her strength. The tunnel beyond was a tight vent shaft lined with heat exhausts. It was not a designed escape route, but it led somewhere, and that was enough. Every few meters, she had to stop and reorient. Blood loss made the walls ripple. Her fingers trembled. Her body threatened to shut down, but her mind? Still calculating. Still driving forward. Every corridor she crawled through, every access pipe she squeezed through, was a silent rebellion against the odds. 2% was just a number, and numbers didn't kill empires. People did. At one point, she stumbled upon a dead Verati technician, burned, crushed, his utility pack still intact. She took his stims, injected herself without hesitation. The pain dulled, her vision cleared slightly, and her steps grew faster. Finally, after what felt like hours, though her internal clock read only 27 minutes, she emerged from a grated floor. Vent into a hangar bay. It was chaos. The upper fortress had caught fire. Automated defenses were offline. Verati soldiers were shouting, scrambling to board evac ships, dragging wounded officers toward drop transports. Smoke choked the air, and power flickered across the walls like lightning trapped in a bottle. And no one noticed her. In the confusion, she was just another shape in the madness. Another casualty. Another shadow. She spotted a small reconnaissance flyer at the far end of the hangar, a single-seat scout ship used for fast dispatches. Low armor. No weapons, but it was fast. And fast was all she needed. She crept low, slipping between supply crates and downed drones. At one point, a Verati officer turned toward her, eyes locking for a split second, but she didn't freeze. She charged. The butt of her rifle slammed into his jaw, knocking him down. Before his partner could react, she pulled the trigger and dropped him with a single, silent bolt. By the time anyone realized what had happened, Talia was already inside the flyer. The controls were alien, organic, fluid-like surfaces that responded to mental impulses. She jammed the stolen command tablet she'd hacked earlier into the console. It sparked, resisted, then success. The ship groaned to life. She launched through the hangar shield just as the entire spire exploded behind her. The sky above Karen 4 lit up like a dying star. Chunks of fortress rained into the volcano fields. A column of blue flame surged upward, visible from orbit. Talia didn't look back. The recon flyer systems were failing. She'd taken hits from debris, but she plotted a course to the upper atmosphere and sent a blind burst transmission. In every frequency Earthships might monitor. Her message was short. Payload delivered. Mission complete. Requesting recovery. Coordinates attached. Then she slumped back in her seat, exhausted, battered, fading. The AI had said she had a 2.07% chance of survival, and yet here she was, flying over the grave of a Verati stronghold, alive. With the enemy's fleet now blind and broken, she laughed weakly, blood on her lips, still wondering what to do with the other 98%. That was the last thing she remembered before blacking out. When rescue finally came, Talia Voss didn't see it. She was unconscious, half fused to the cracked pilot seat of the stolen Verati flyer, floating in low orbit above the burning ruins of Karen 4. Her distress signal had pulsed out in all directions. Dying gasp in the galactic dark. But someone had heard it. The TSS Resolute, an Earth war cruiser patrolling the sector, picked up her signal during a routine sweep. At first, the crew thought it was debris noise static from the battlefield's graveyard. But the signature was Terran encoded, wrapped in a cipher only used by Black Ops, and it was coming from a Verati ship. Alarms triggered. Marines suited up. Weapons were raised. They found the ship adrift, power failing, oxygen at critical levels. Inside, they found her slumped in the pilot's chair, still breathing barely. Her heart rate was faint, her blood pressure dangerously low, and her body was covered in burns, cuts, and bone-deep bruises. But the moment a Marine reached to stabilize her neck, she opened her eyes. Just for a second. Her lips cracked into a faint, blood-stained grin. Got room for one more? Then she passed out again. They rushed her into the medbay. She woke up 3 days later, wrapped in a regeneration cocoon aboard the Resolute. She couldn't move, but she could see, hear, think. Doctors and commanders cycled in and out of her room, speaking in hushed, reverent tones. Word had already spread. 1 cadet, 1 mission, 1 dead fortress. The Verati communication uplink had been destroyed. Fleet coordination was in disarray. Dozens of human colonies had just been saved from annihilation. The turning point in the war? A 22-year-old recon cadet with a 2% survival chance, and she had won. When she was strong enough to speak, the first words out of her mouth weren't dramatic or poetic. They were dry. Sardonic. Well, that was fun. The med officer blinked. You realize you technically died for 38 seconds before resuscitation. Still counts as a win. Her recovery was slow, grueling. Nerve regrowth, muscle reconstruction, weeks in med tanks. But Talia was patient. She always had been. She knew that survival wasn't about speed or strength. It was about outlasting. Whatever came next, and now for once, next didn't mean gunfire, it meant recognition. She didn't expect the medals. She didn't want the spotlight. But the brass insisted. She was awarded the Star of Terra, Earth's highest military honor, in a quiet ceremony aboard a flagship. A dozen high-ranking officers and diplomats stood in full dress uniform. Cameras broadcasted across every system. But Talia barely noticed. She only cared that the mission was over, and that others would live because of it. One general, gruff and scarred from his own battles, approached her afterward. We've run the sim. Again. With everything you did, the survival odds? She raised an eyebrow. Still 2%? He shook his head. Lower, she smirked. Then I guess I overachieved. She was offered a full commission. Command wanted her training special units. Black Ops wanted her in Deep Shadow. The press wanted interviews. The people wanted a hero. She chose something different. Talia returned to Earth not for retirement, but to teach. She became an instructor at the Terran Survival Corps Academy, training young cadets in the art of impossible missions. Her classes were brutal, realistic, unforgiving, and her motto became legend. 2% is not a death sentence. It's a challenge. Students feared her, respected her, worshipped her, because she had done what no simulation could explain. She had refused to die. Years passed. The war shifted. The Varadi, weakened from the blow she dealt, eventually sued for peace. Treaties were signed. Colonies rebuilt. The galaxy, at last, began to heal. But stories of the cadet who turned the tide of the girl who laughed at 2% only grew. There were songs, statues, hollahs, and yet, in a quiet corner of Earth, in a survival classroom full of muddy boots and shattered drones, Talia Voss stood before a new generation of humans and said, "You are not statistics. You are not simulations. You are human. And that means you don't ask if you'll make it. You ask what you'll do after you do." She turned, eyes sharp, as ever. And when someone tells you the odds are 2%, you smile and ask what the other 98% is for.